And joining us today is Dave Skuodas, Construction and Maintenance Director of Mile High Flood District, also an engineer. You're going to explain a little bit about what you all do. But when you see flooding like this, what comes to your head in doing what you do?
First thing is, did anybody foresee this amount of rain and this amount of flooding in this spot? And it was kind of interesting to look at the floodplain maps around Camp Mystic in particular. I'm not an expert on Texas, but I researched it a little bit, and it was interesting to see how parts of Camp Mystic, especially the cabins, were at a very identified flood risk. But to have something like that happen in the middle of the night, have 20 feet of river rise in 2 hours, it's a hard thing for any emergency plan to contend with something like that. So I think about, what do we know ahead of time? What happened during the event? What could we have expected to happen? And then also, what can we learn from it?
That's what sadly, these things happen. It doesn't matter if you think of 2013, you talk about 1965 in Colorado, talk about the Big Thompson flood. We've had floods that have taught us a lot. And specifically, we were going to talk a little bit about, I think, the flooding 70 years ago in Littleton that changed a lot of things. And so something like this happens, and then you all come in, right, and look at all the things and learn from them, change things up.
Yeah, we sure try. And I think the conversations around the water cooler this morning centered around, is our flood warning system adequate for situations like this where you have people in a camping setting overnight? How do you reach folks like that? Certainly there's reverse 911 options and things like that, but would you need sirens and blaring, something that tells people get to high ground? Because there's always, it can always rain harder, there can always be something worse that happens or something we haven't planned for. But the Big Thompson flood in 1976, we learned so much from that. As you mentioned, 144 people died in that flood, and part of it was because they didn't know it was coming. And so in the aftermath of that flood, one of the things my agency did was create our first flood warning system for the Denver metro area. So that was a big thing we learned. So it's always something where you're trying to learn from each of these events to see what you can do better.
Yeah. We don't appreciate it. For those of us that don't do anything like you, when you hear the word infrastructure alone, you're like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
But you do make changes, dramatic changes in not only like the way the water runs itself, but roads and everything else, and warning systems to hopefully prevent something like this from happening again.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of our work is geared towards trying to create enough space for the water to flow through the system and not harm or damage anybody. That's the ultimate goal. But the reality is a lot of the areas around the metro Denver area are older than the 1970s. It wasn't until around the 1970s when we started planning cities around flood risk very well. And so parts of cities that are older than that, more often than not, have a high level of residual flood risk. So we have a lot of work we're doing to build infrastructure projects to find a place for that water to go. And one example project, if you're driving around town, a lot of people might notice, is along Colfax Avenue near Casa Bonita. We're doing a big, messy project right there. There should be a stream there. The way the land developed covered it over. And so the water still finds a way and it floods the surface. And so we're building a bunch of underground systems there to find a place for the water to go. We prefer open channel systems. They tend to be a lot more resilient. They age better. They create a place for nature and all that sort of stuff. But that's one big project people might notice as they're driving around town, in addition to lots of others.
Oh, I'm glad you said that, because sometimes you see construction and you have no idea what it is. So that's a very good thing. It's safe for all of us. Wow. Well, thank you for that. We really appreciate it. Even under these difficult circumstances, we appreciate what you do every day. I mean, looking out for all the rest of us and yourself.
Yeah, we know it's going to rain, so.
Unfortunately. Thank you.